But we do have some rugby league to chat because the Warriors defeated the Cronulla Sharks, and that was nice. Everyone finished on a lovely note, little celebrations. And I've got the Warriors crowds here at Mount Smart. The 2023 average was 18,800. The 2024 average was 22,800. So there's a big increase there, and those are big crowds. Like throughout the season, every crowd except for one, I believe. Yes. Every crowd was over 23,000 except for one. The Broncos game was 22,700. So, like, part of me is like, yeah, the Warriors stepped up to finish the season on a high. It's like, well, you had some big games at Mount Smart that you couldn't step up for, you know? Like, it's a bit weird. Like, they've been getting big crowds at Mount Smart all season, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, and it would have been nice if they just stepped up for that Anzac Day game against the Titans. That would have been a great occasion. They had a draw against the Seagulls at Mount Smart. Let me roll through here. They lost to the Storm at Mount Smart. They lost to the Eels, then they lost to the Bulldogs at Mount Smart. And of course, the Bulldogs game, whoopsie daisy, the Bulldogs game was Sean Johnson's last game at Mount Smart. So somehow they stepped up for this game to finish the season on a high, but they couldn't step up for games in front of big crowds at Mount Smart Stadium. So it's just an awkward vibe. That's the season for the Warriors, and all season long we have talked that the best Warriors performances have come with strong contributions from younger players from second tier Warriors. The best wins of the season against the Panthers, against the Dolphins. They were both they both had core groups of second tier Warriors playing at a high level. And that was on show to a lesser extent against the Sharks, because we had Taine Tuaupiki playing at a high level, and we had Ali Leotawa playing at a high level as well. I did write about Ali Leotawa this morning, Kiwi NRL Spotlight, and he's got a 50% win rate or higher in his 2 seasons of NRL and 2 seasons in New South Wales Cup. Pretty sure Taine Tuaupiki has the same thing. Let me pull this up. I did drop all those Taine Tuaupiki stats in the newsletter. I'm not sure if I had the win percentages. Let me double check. Taine Tuaupiki, New South Wales Cup, 64% winning. Last year, 64% winning this season. NRL, 5 games, 60% winning last year. 6 games, 50% winning this year. So aside from Dimitri Sifikula, who I think this was his first win in the NRL, despite being a fantastic young forward for the Warriors, like whether it was Paul Roach stepping up for a game against the Panthers, you know, Moala Graham-Talfa mid-season had a couple of wins. The best element of this season for the Warriors was the young players, and we all want to see these youngsters play more footy, but I do think the Warriors are in alignment with some sort of plan to drip feed the youngsters into the NRL. Like Taine Tuaupiki played 5 games last year, he's played 6 games this season. Ali Leotawa played 1 game last season, now he's played 6 games this season. Sifikula played 4 games in a row. We had Zion Ma'u make his debut, Jacob Laban made his debut this season, Leka Halasima made his debut. So you got 3 dudes right there who made their debuts this season. Moala Graham-Talfa got a little taster as well. I keep thinking, like, if the Warriors just came out and said, we got a 3-year plan, because Phil Gould, he's the mastermind of the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, which means he's got a job for 5 years, he's got a job for 10 years. The Warriors didn't announce any plans. They went the opposite way, and Andrew Webster, it came out later on that Andrew Webster had said, I want to work with the players that we have here at the Warriors. And that led to instant success last season. So suddenly the Warriors themselves blew up the expectations based on last year, where I think if you ask Andrew McFadden, he might be, yeah, by year 3, we're going to be a team with a lot of local juniors playing NRL, and we're going to build towards that peak. And I think they're on track for that plan. When you look at how the youngsters have performed this season and the second tier players, because Paul Roach isn't necessarily a youngster, but you look at how those players have been integrated into the NRL, how they have performed in the NRL, how they have performed in New South Wales Cup, because the New South Wales Cup team are playing finals footy for the second year in a row, despite having 2 different coaches. Like, they're a good team, and they are a good team with all these youngsters playing a lot of footy in New South Wales Cup for 2 years in a row now. I think that is just part of a plan that might not exist. Just a plan I've created, and I might be putting it on the 2 Andys, Andrew McFadden and Andrew Webster. But I can see how they are building towards that, and I think the performances of the youngsters this year has been a notable wrinkle, because the best Warriors games, the best Warriors wins, featured strong contributions from those second tier players. There's a couple of things in the NRL that I think put into context what the Warriors are doing. And again, I'm just going to double check this on the fly. So you're like, the Warriors, they're pretty cool. Okay, they didn't make the finals this year. And it's not like smooth sailing at the moment. We've talked about some Warriors issues. We've talked about some bad vibes. But hey, sip some gratitude, because the Warriors aren't the Tigers. The Tigers, they are last in the NRL heading into the wooden spoon battle against the Eels. They're both on 18 points, but the Tigers are last via points differential. Let me check in the NRLW, where the Tigers are last. The Tigers are 0-6 in the NRLW. So the Tigers right now, they are last in the NRL, and they are last in NRLW. Let me check the New South Wales Cup ladder.
Don't tell me it gets worse.
We've got the Western Suburbs Magpies. So if you've seen the NRL news, there's no Balmain New South Wales Cup team. It's a Western Suburbs New South Wales Cup team. So if you've been following the Tigers news, this is some of the nitty gritty. And the Western Suburbs Magpies, they are last in New South Wales Cup. So let me finish this. So the Women's Premiership. Hey, that's the Wentworthville Magpies. They're the Magpies. New South Wales Cup Tigers team, they're called the Magpies as well. There's a lot of Magpies. There's a lot of Seagulls when you go into the NRL affiliated team list. But Wentworthville, I believe, is actually affiliated with the Eels. And they might be first. No, the Eels have their own New South Wales Cup team. So I'm not sure who the Wentworthville Magpies are. Let me check, because they might be affiliated with the Tigers, and they might be first. So shout out to them. I'm not sure if they are, but what's that? That's an actual West Tigers women's team in the New South Wales Women's Premiership, who are second to last.
So improving on the rest of the club.
Yeah. So, I'm not too over the nitty gritty of the Wentworthville Magpies, who may be affiliated with West Tigers, but there's 3 teams named West Tigers who are either last or second to last, and then there's another team, Western Suburbs, who are affiliated with the Tigers. They're last in New South Wales Cup. And if we go New South Wales Cup, Warriors are 4th this year. Maybe the Tigers were pretty good last year in New South Wales Cup. They were 11th out of 13th. So the Warriors aren't the Tigers. Not only are they better than the Tigers as far as football goes, fair play, the Warriors don't have a women's team right now, but they also don't have that merger bickering. And as we've talked about before, Like all the Warriors sponsors, they are national brands. You get into these Sydney clubs and you're dealing with a lot of like local neighborhood brands sponsoring. So business-wise, the Warriors are not the Tigers. Structure-wise, the Warriors are not the Tigers. Performance-wise, the Warriors are not the Tigers. So shout out to the Warriors. You are not the Tigers. Also, some context around how the Warriors have performed this season. Last year, the Broncos made the grand final against the Panthers, and the Warriors finished third. The Knights finished fifth. The Raiders finished seventh. Or no, let me skip through a round. So the Broncos finished second, Warriors were fourth, Knights fifth, Raiders eighth. And as we know, the Broncos made the grand final, and the Warriors defeated the Knights, then lost to the Broncos in that finals campaign. If we fast forward to this year, the Knights are 9th, the Raiders are 11th, the Broncos are 12th, and the Warriors are 13th. So the Warriors, they're in a tier above the Tigers. Shout out to the Warriors. They're a tier above the Tigers as an organization. And in that tier are 3 other teams who made the finals last year who are not in finals footy ahead of the final round. The Warriors are only 1 win behind the Broncos, and the Broncos made the grand final last year.
Beating the Warriors along the way.
Exactly. So that puts into context, like, yeah, this season sucked for the Warriors, but I've just said that the best performances featured a lot of youngsters, many of whom are going to take on greater roles next season. And you're also signing Fisher Harris. But then you're not alone in dropping out of the finals from last season. The Knights have a good chance. The Raiders and the Knights have a decent chance of getting into finals footy, so shout out to them. But if we compare the Warriors to the Broncos, the Warriors' vibe right now is far better than the Broncos. Like the Warriors finished on a high. Who are the Broncos playing this week? They're playing the Melbourne Storm. Suncorp Stadium on Thursday night. The Storm could do anything. Like they could rest a whole bunch of players and they could beat the Broncos with their second tier team. Because they got superstars like Alec McDonald from Aotearoa, Joe Chan, Jack Howarth, New Zealand A players, and so on. And if the Broncos lose to that Melbourne Storm team, like the vibe right now, the Warriors have a far better vibe right now because the Broncos just got rolled by the Dolphins. If they beat the Storm, then I might say it's even. But if the Storm beat the Broncos to finish the season, then the Warriors finish below the Broncos, but I reckon the vibe is far better. And that just puts into context like the whole Warriors season. There's a lot of good young talent coming through, many of whom now have plenty of experience in the NRL. They've signed Fish Harris for next season. They might sign Aaron Clark for next season. Better than the Tigers as an organization, and they are not alone. There's 3 other teams right now from last year's finals mix who aren't in the finals right now. So I think that's a good summary of where the Warriors are at. Like, sure, this is a disappointing year, but in the context of how other teams are performing, it doesn't seem as bad as it is, although the performances at Mount Smart in front of big crowds, in front of a lot of fans who have shown up week in, week out, this must be the best season for Warriors attendance ever. And somehow the Warriors decided to stink it up at Mount Smart. So that's there's a lot of, I was talking last week about balancing the reality with some hope and optimism. This is just a continuation of that, where you just got to balance all these matters together, and it kind of feels like a stinker of a season. The Mount Smart thing's disappointing, but there's other teams, especially the Broncos, who they're dropping, diminishing, decreasing performance seems and feels far more dramatic than the Warriors. Like, there's more drama with the Broncos if they suck. So it's kind of good, kind of bad, and that's just where the Warriors are at right now. But again, heading into next season, I think there's a lot of strong foundations to build upon.
Yeah, I'm just looking through what's their actual this is why it's tricky because I was looking through to see what their home like the actual wins and losses figure is for their home stuff, but then the home stuff includes a game in Christchurch, I think it was at the start of the season, which they won. So that's boosting their home record, which isn't a Mount Smart game. And then I don't know if it includes they seem to have been technically the home team for Magic Round as well, even though that's obviously a neutral ground. I don't know if that's included in that. So it's a little
so
bit...
if we take out those two things, they are 4 and 5. Because those were two wins.
Because they won. They beat the Panthers in Magic Round. So
and they won in
their
Christchurch.
two best home wins weren't at Mount Smart.
So they've got their best home wins were not at Mount Smart, but they're 6 and 5 at home. So you take out the two wins that you're talking about, they're 4 and 5. So 4 and 5 at Mount Smart, off the top of the head. That's not great, and it's not great when you're 3 and 9 in Australia.
Yeah, add those things together, and you just have a team that's maybe not that great, which tracks with what we saw from the Warriors. But the weird thing about them is that in typical Warriors fashion, this wasn't just a steadily average team. They beat the Panthers in one game. Their reserves turned up and beat the Dolphins, who are looking now like they might be a top 8 side after all. They've had games where there's so many single try defeats and a draw as well in there, with just one more try or just one fewer try conceded, and the result of that game changes. So many close losses. They've also had stirring comebacks, and they've had games where they started really well and then just capitulate. They had one of, if not their biggest ever defeats to a Titans team that wasn't even playing that well at that time, although they've been better since then. They've also had there's games where their senior players who were so good for them last season have just really struggled, and that Sean Johnson losing streak was a part of that. There's games where the guys backing them up have been really good, some in a couple of occasions spectacular, and that might actually be quite a positive thing moving forward for the reasons you're just saying there. Is if some of those older guys are getting older and a couple of them are leaving, and you have guys who are now getting towards being established NRL players, we're starting to get the taste for victory. There's those guys are only going to get better, and it's such a strange season. It's such a weird season with these big extremes, but I like the 3-year plan idea. Even if whether it's real or not, I still like the 3-year plan. I think anytime a new coach comes in to try and not just carry on what was before them, but actually change things and reset the club to some extent, or at least just coming in to try set a distinct new era in a team. I think 3 years is a good judgment for that. I mean, if you sack a guy within that, either things have to be absolutely terrible to where it's this was a mistake, this wasn't going to work, or you have to give them at least 3 years and say, well, let's look what it's like at the end of that. Webster's first year, fantastic. Second year, pretty average, bad if you compare it to what he had done in year one. But yeah, I still think that third year is the decisive one. I sort of feel like this is a withhold judgment situation. And if you have one fantastic year and then 2 pretty bad ones, well, then you think, it's something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a coaching change, but something needs to be fixed here because this direction isn't working. But if you have a really good year and then a bit of a sophomore slump, but then you bounce back in the third year, having learnt the lessons of the second season, having brought through young players steadily throughout those 3 years to where they're ready for their NRL team at the end of that, and you have quite a good year, well, then everything is on the right track. Then it doesn't matter that the second season was a slump because the second season still helps you get to that point. And that that remains to be seen with this Warriors team, but there's plenty of positives. There's plenty of stuff to take from what we saw this season. That's one of the things about having those extremes is that, well, at least you can see that the team is capable of better. And next season, maybe they will serve up better. At the very least, having James Fisher-Harris turning up is probably a good. That's the arrow pointing in the right direction, at least to start with.
The 3-year plan, I think it's less about NRL performance and it's more about building a roster. And there's like a lot of people like this. It's kind of been a situational season. We've talked about it. Like I've said all season long, the youngsters are playing better footy than the NRL team. But these two dudes, Webster, McFadden, as I've said, they were at the Warriors before. They saw how junior players had their careers and their contributions to the NRL ravaged by promoting them when they weren't ready. So I can talk up the youngsters all I want, but I think they are wise to drip feed these young players into the team all season, over the course of 2 seasons now. Meanwhile, the team they play for otherwise wins. They are a good New South Wales Cup team. So you're not losing anything by them playing a lot of consistent New South Wales Cup footy. But the 3-year plan idea is that by year 3, the guys who have been drip fed into the NRL across year 1 and year 2, now they are playing a lot of top 17 footy. And to do that, you need to shuffle some dudes out. So over the course of this period, we've seen Josh Curran, Bailey Sirinen. They left from last year. Ronald Volkman left from last year. Now we got Whenua Blake, maybe Bunty Afoa, Jazz Tavanga. There was some whispers about Dylan Walker, but we won't include him in this mix. That's 6 dudes right there who have been shuffled out of the Warriors NRL squad. And most of those spots will be taken by the local juniors. But you can't do that year 1. You can't just say, big dog, I'm Andrew Webster and I'm Andrew McFadden. We're the 2 Andys. We don't want you here. See you later. No, they came in and they were like, we're going to work with what we have and we're going to build towards a sustainable future. Over the course of these 2 years, you have seen them shuffle some dudes out. And those dudes are they are making way for the youngsters. So I think the way they've done it might not necessarily have been conducive with winning footy this year, because I think the older players were bad this year. They didn't win. So I don't usually selecting a whole lot of youngsters isn't conducive with winning, but in this instance, I think it might have been more useful to the Warriors. But if we're operating from this 3-year plan idea, then you can say, okay, let's just stay patient with our youngsters. Let's make sure they're ready for week-to-week NRL footy, and let's build towards that, because all these youngsters, Leotawa, Laban, Halasima, Sifakula, Graham Telfer, Zion Maiu, Kailani Going, not a youngster. Paul Roach, not a youngster, but they can contribute. Eddie Iramia, Makaya Tafua, Sio Kelly, Motu Pasikala, all these dudes now have 2, 3 NRL preseasons under their belts. And I think the NRL preseason is a key factor, because that's when you do all your training, your NRL quality fitness and strength training. So yeah, that's my overarching ideas about the Warriors. And another thing I was thinking about, let's test you here. What's a physical trait that I've talked about the Warriors lacking this season? It actually goes back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, I wanted to say mobility, but I know that you actually mean speed.
I mean speed. And I mean
not
speed.
Just leg speed.
Not just leg speed. I mean actual speed. Team against the Sharks. You got Tane Tuapiki, he's got plenty of zip. You got Luke Metcalf, who's pretty quick. So you can see how bad Warriors teams this year, there was no speed. They were slow. But if you insert 2 players, now you've got 2 fast players. I think Moala Graham Telfer's fast. So he's another one I think who can add speed to the NRL team. And the one player I reckon you hear leg speed the most when talked about is Aaron Clark. He's all leg speed. Reality is he's just a fast middle forward, but he's got great leg speed. So if Aaron Clark comes to the Warriors next season, and the Warriors play with Taintua Piki at fullback, Luke Metcalf in the halves, Aaron Clark in the 17, and maybe some games you have Graham Telfer. Well, then you've got 4 dudes who are fast for their positions who weren't necessarily top 17 players this season. So you're going from a slow team to a team with speed. And I think that's going to be a key wrinkle going into next season if they do sign Aaron Clark, because speed helps you win games in the NRL if you're doing all the other things well. Because the Titans are super fast with Aaron Clark, Lofiana Khan Pereira, so on, Keanu Kinney. But they don't have a lot of the things that the Warriors have already shown, mainly last year.